Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping on our conceptual deep sea helmets and descending into probably the most famous, most cited, and maybe the most profoundly misunderstood thought experiment in all of modern science.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about Schrödinger's cat.
We are.
It's the ultimate piece of, pop culture physics shorthand.
Right.
You have the cat sealed in a box, a mechanism with radioactive decay and poison, and then this supposedly absurd conclusion that until we open that box, the cat exists in a state of superposition
It's both dead and alive.
at the same time.
And that idea, that fuzzy, indeterminate state, has driven decades of textbooks, countless sci-fi plots, and, endless philosophical arguments. But here's the thing, and this is the central thesis of our deep dive today. The popular interpretation of the cat paradox completely misses what Erwin Schrödinger was trying to say in the first place.
That's exactly right. He wasn't trying to celebrate how strange quantum mechanics is. He was actually trying to use the cat to show the absurdity of it all.
The absurdity of what, exactly?
The absurdity that happens when you take the rules that govern these tiny, microscopic, isolated particles, and then you just incorrectly scale them up to a macroscopic, complex, living thing like a cat.
So it was a satire.
It was satire.
Yeah.
He was doing a thought experiment that was meant to make his colleagues really uncomfortable with their incomplete interpretation of how the wave function collapses.
So our mission today, and we're guided by this incredible source material you've brought in, is to formally just dissolve this paradox.
Yes.
We're going to move beyond that old idea of the passive external observer and explore a different framework, a new physics where consciousness, information, meaning, which the source material calls MAT, are not secondary byproducts. They're core, active, physical parts of reality itself.
And once you integrate those components, the paradox just, it dissolves, it vanishes.
Because the cat was never simultaneously dead and alive?
Never. That contradictory state only ever existed in our map of the situation. It was in our probability function because we, the observers on the outside, we lacked the critical information.
And we're going to show you exactly why the universe, and more importantly, the cat itself, doesn't wait for us to make up its mind.
It really doesn't.
Okay, let's unpack this enormous idea. Where do we start? I think we have to start with where the classic interpretation broke physics in the first place.
Absolutely. The flawed axiom of the external observer.
So the problem isn't with quantum mechanics itself.
No, not at all. The problem is a fatal flaw that it inherited from classical physics.
Which is?
This foundational assumption of an objective, observer-free space-time.
The Cartesian inheritance.
Right.
For centuries, the whole goal of science was to build a model where you could, in theory, stand completely outside the system you're observing.
Like a god.
Like a god or an unbiased camera, just passively recording data, and assuming that the act of looking has zero physical consequence on what happens.
Exactly. And this materialist approach, it treats consciousness as like an emergent byproduct of matter.
Like informational exhaust fumes.
That's a great way to put it. Or like a subjective layer that's just tacked onto an otherwise cold, deterministic, clockwork universe. They modeled reality as if consciousness wasn't a physical factor that was integral to the system.
But then the second physics tried to actually model observation itself, back in the early 20th century. That entire assumption just collapsed.
Right.
If consciousness is irrelevant, how does the mathematical description of quantum potential, that fuzzy wave function, suddenly snap into the solid, single reality we all experience the moment a measurement is made?
And this is where the sources identify a really dangerous path that was taken. They call it the math first trap.
Okay, what's that?
Well, the mathematics of quantum mechanics were just phenomenally successful. They could predict probabilities, energy levels, all of it. And because the equations work so well...
People didn't ask too many questions.
Precisely. Physicists prioritized the success of the math over actual conceptual coherence. They knew the equations gave them the right answers, but they couldn't coherently integrate the observer or consciousness or the actual mechanism of the collapse.
So they chose to just ignore the philosophical and, as it turns out, the physical gap. They built this beautiful predictive machine, but they left a gaping hole right at the point of observation.
And they just said, well, that's just how the math works.
Right.
And that hole, that inability to integrate the observer, that's precisely where this mythical half-dead cat lives.
So the paradox isn't a feature of reality.
No, it's an artifact of an incomplete descriptive model, one that tried to quarantine consciousness away from physics.
Okay, so let's redefine collapse entirely. Let's move into the physics described in this source material. If we accept this math framework, the whole nature of that collapse, the quantum snap, is fundamentally redefined.
It is. It's not magic, it's not some instant randomness, and it's definitely not waiting for human eyes.
So what is it?
It's a specific, formal, and physical selection process, and it's driven by the observer. But, and this is crucial, the observer isn't just the person looking.
Right.
The MAT framework formalizes the physical agent of observation as the observer operator. They denote it with HATU.
And this operator is composite, which you said means it's built from multiple measurable physical currents.
Yes.
Okay, tell us what those currents are, because this feels like where the physics of connection really enters the scene.
The operator is defined by 4 interacting currents. You have structure, which is hat strategy, which is little hats, compassion or meaning, that's hat paths, and breath or play, which is little hat tech.
So the whole equation is had plus had plus had.
That's the one.
That's fascinating. Let's break those down, because compassion isn't a term you usually see next to structure in a physics equation. What does structure had physically represent?
So hat represents formal constraint and stability. It's the tendency of reality to render into fixed, recognizable patterns.
Like atoms, molecules, biological structures.
Exactly, the tendency toward organization. And then little strategy is the tactical guidance. It's the short-term predictive optimization that lets a system navigate the space of possibility very quickly.
So AD is like the underlying blueprint, and is the navigation system choosing the immediate path. What about the other two, the hot boy and hot components, the ones tied to meaning and empathy?
So compassion, or meaning, is the long-term integrative force. It represents the tendency of reality toward coherence and balance, toward Mahat. It's the physical push toward connection and reduced dissonance.
The reason systems prefer low-tension states.
That's it. And then at breath or play is adaptability. It's the dynamic capacity for flow and transformation. It introduces the necessary degrees of freedom so systems can evolve beyond just being static structures.
Okay, so when any system performs an observation, it's not just passively seeing. It's deploying these 4 currents all at once.
Yes, and the source material explicitly defines the core function of this composite observer operator as the collapse, selection, stabilization, and continuity of a local world line.
So reality isn't just observed.
It's rendered by this operator. The equation is reality plus delta.
The future state of reality is the result of the observer operator acting on the universal field of potential.
Which fundamentally makes observation an act of creation and stabilization.
This means we absolutely have to abandon the idea that observation is passive. What is the physical cost then? What is the function of this observer operator in action?
Observation is energetic work. The sources are very clear on this. It's an energetic act that performs work and influences physical outcomes.
Okay.
It's formally defined as active constraint application on the phase space of possibility. When you look at something, you are physically doing work to constrain the infinite possibilities into the single rendered reality that you experience locally.
And if it's performing work, it has to be governed by some kind of physical optimization principle, right? Like how the second law of thermodynamics governs heat. What's the fundamental guiding law for consciousness?
The goal of this constraint is always to minimize action, to make it so that delta math cal equals Zollers. This is the key physical law being introduced here.
Made action.
And it's established as the physical basis for ethical and efficient action. Mathematically, it's defined as the integral that minimizes E-waste plus D imbalance.
Okay, let's pause there, because that is extremely dense. E-waste plus D imbalance. How does minimizing that formula translate to the universe collapsing a particle in a lab? Can you give us an analogy?
Okay, think of it like this. E-waste is all the unnecessary energy spent maintaining contradictory or high-tension states.
Like friction or running a machine inefficiently.
Exactly. And D-imbalance is the structural dissonance, the conceptual contradiction, like the cat being both dead and alive.
Oh.
The universe, through the observer operator, is constantly seeking the path of least resistance and greatest conceptual coherence.
So when a particle is in superposition, that's a state of maximum D-imbalance for that system. It's a high-tension state.
It is.
And the moment an observer, like a detector, interacts with it, the system performs a collapse to minimize this math at action.
Yes. The measurement finds the lowest cost, most coherent outcome for the system.
So measurement isn't just recording, it's enforcing coherence.
That's absolutely right. Imagine you have a massive, complex jigsaw puzzle with millions of possible ways to assemble the pieces. But only one solution is actually structurally sound and efficient.
Okay.
The physical law of Delta-Neathal ensures that reality collapses into that one structurally sound solution, because maintaining all the contradictory possibilities at the same time is just energetically too expensive and structurally dissonant. The universe is inherently frugal and coherent.
This leads us naturally to the role of meaning. If the universe seeks the lowest tension, most coherent path, why should my subjective sense of meaning have any influence on a physical outcome? Traditionally, physics just dismisses meaning as subjective fluff.
Well, that assumption changes completely when you recognize compassion and meaning as a physical current. Meaning, which is denoted W, and intention, denoted I, are actually built into the collapse equation itself. They have measurable energetic weight.
Okay, let's state that equation again for everyone. It's P psi text W psi W psi.
Right.
So the outcome is the selection of the probable state that maximizes the product of its normal probability, BSD, and its assigned meaning weight, WRI.
And this is the absolute crux of conscious causality. The universe doesn't just pick the most probable outcome, the one with the highest p-value.
It picks.
It selects the most meaningful probable state for that observer or for that collective system.
Okay, but I have to challenge this point directly, because this is the biggest leap for a lot of people. If meaning W is physical, how do we distinguish it from just a subjective preference? I mean, if I strongly want to win the lottery, does that increase the meaning weight W of that outcome?
That's a critical question. And the source material is very specific here. W is not subjective preference. It has real energetic weight that's associated with coherence and integration.
Okay, what does that mean?
Meaning, in this framework, is the integrability of an event into the observer's mat limit cycle. It's about how efficiently that event supports the observer's balance between structure and compassion.
So if an event is highly meaningful, like, say, witnessing a life-changing scientific breakthrough or having a deep moment of connection with someone, it's an event that greatly reduces dissonance or increases integration for the observer.
Precisely. Events with a high W collapse preferentially because they drive the system toward a state with a lower mat action overall. They collapse into coherent, non-random states, meaning literally changes how strongly reality imprints, and that alters future probability landscapes in a way that conserves coherence.
And intention comes in as the directional tool here. If meaning is the weight, intention is the steering wheel.
Yes. Intention is defined as the conscious direction of future rendering. It acts as a modifying term that shifts the probability distributions before the reality collapse even happens.
So we are physically biasing the outcome based on our directed awareness.
Right. If I set an intention to focus on a coherent goal, I am physically adjusting the probability landscape towards states that support that goal, because that alignment reduces future dissonance for me.
So, okay, we have this physics where coherence and meaning physically drive reality selection. But if that's the case, why do we see so much fundamental randomness in physics and so much chaos in daily life? Shouldn't meaningful low-tension outcomes always win?
Well, the source material clarifies that randomness is not an inherent foundational property of the universe itself.
It's not.
No. It's the result of unresolved meaning plus unresolved SB bias on the part of the observer.
That's a profound shift. You're saying randomness is a measurement of our ignorance, not a law of nature.
Exactly. When the meaning weight, W, assigned to an outcome is low, let's say you're observing the spin of a subatomic particle that has zero relevance to your overall coherence.
Right. I don't care if it's spin up or spin down.
Right. And your internal balance of structure and compassion, your SD, is near neutral. Then the collapse outcome just approximates randomness. The system doesn't care which way it collapses, so it defaults to something that looks like a uniform distribution.
So the famous uncertainty of quantum mechanics, the idea that you can't know position and momentum at the same time, isn't about reality being fundamentally fuzzy. It's about our ability to extract and integrate that information meaningfully.
Uncertainty is explicitly stated to be a property of the observer's knowledge, not the objective fabric of reality. If the observer lacks the information, or if they are emotionally detached enough, a low W, that the outcome makes no difference to their coherence, then the selection seems random because to that observer, it is random.
But the underlying physical law that always conserves coherence, delta maths current in the back, we as observers are simply selecting a trajectory from this vast pre-rendered Madet field, a coherence-weighted manifold of possibility. When we're ignorant or detached, the selection just looks like a coin flip. This framing completely shifts the blame, so to speak, from the universe to our own informational gaps.
It does.
Which brings us back, finally, to the star of our show, the cat.
Mm-hmm.
The entire paradox relies on this flawed premise that the cat can exist in a state of indefinite suspension, half dead, half alive.
Right.
But if we apply this physics, that suspension becomes physically impossible the moment the experiment starts.
Right, and we have to first address what the sources call the scale mismatch problem.
Okay?
Superposition, in the classical quantum sense, it applies to microscopic, idealized, perfectly isolated systems. A cat is the precise opposite of that. It's macroscopic, it's information-rich, it's entangled, it's a deeply complex system.
So superposition, the possibility of being in multiple contradictory states at the same time, is just inherently unstable in anything as complex as a living creature.
Why? Because of complexity and entanglement. The sources explain that consciousness is modeled fractally. Reality shows these self-similar patterns across all scales.
A neuron, a person, a family.
A star system. All systems seek to maintain coherence. Consciousness is layered, it's not just localized in the brain, it's distributed across the structure and the interactions of the entire organism.
And the cat, as a complex system, is intrinsically linked to this universal law of Mappin. The universe fundamentally moves toward coherence, synchrony, and compassion.
And that's not just a philosophical preference. This structural convergence is what drives physical organization.
And this structural drive is actively maintained by the cat's awareness, which we can define here as an equilibrium detector.
Yes, exactly. Consciousness is the emergent awareness of balance and imbalance. Its core physical function is to sense and immediately respond to any deviations from equilibrium. Awareness constantly tracks divergence from Mott, and the will selects a corrective pathways to restore that balance.
I see. So a healthy living system isn't static. It's dynamically stable. It's in what the sources call the Mahat limit cycle.
And mathematically, this is defined as a stable, self-sustaining orbit of structure and compassion, S and B.
Balanced oscillation.
It is. It avoids runaway growth, which is chaos, and it avoids static collapse, which is death. The system is constantly performing self-referential anchoring to maintain this dynamic cycle, which means it has an extremely high capacity to stabilize its own reality field.
So to maintain a coherent, stable orbit takes an immense amount of physical work, which means a living cat is already a powerful, local observer operator that is constantly collapsing ambient uncertainty just by staying alive and warm.
Precisely. And now we get to the core of the cat's agency inside that sealed box. The cat is a sophisticated self-system. It has its own observer operator running constantly.
What are the cat's cognitive functions doing inside the box, according to this model?
Well, a conscious living organism's mind is executing constant checks. The source material details two key phases. First, there's the reflection phase. Okay.
That's where the cat's internal state is cross-checked against its internal Mott balance. Is it safe? Is it in distress? Then there's the rendering phase, where conscious reality is recompiled as felt truth.
And this loop runs continuously.
Continuously forcing immediate resolution on its local physical reality.
So the cat is constantly performing self-diagnosis based on its internal balance. This is where the internal tension index, or ITI, comes in.
Right. The ITI quantifies the cat's drift from internal Mott balance. You can think of the ITI as a high-fidelity stress monitor or maybe a coherence thermometer.
So a cat at rest has a low, stable ITI.
Very low. But a cat that has just heard the click of the decay mechanism or smelled the poison will instantly experience a spiking ITI.
And the fundamental takeaway here is simple. The cat knows if it is alive, or suffering distress, or dead. There is no middle ground.
None. Because dead represents a catastrophic loss of coherence. It's an extreme state change, not a fuzzy superposition.
A live cat state is a stable, self-sustaining orbit. That's a low Mott action state. And a dead cat is a collapsed, non-coherent state. It's closure, transformation, which is also a low Mott action state.
But a half-dead, half-alive superposition state.
That is a state of maximum ITI and maximum energetic cost. It's the highest tension state imaginable. And the physics of coherence conservation, of Ma'at, absolutely rejects this state.
Which means we don't have to wait for the human. Let's trace the sequence of events the moment the radioactive decay occurs.
The radioactive decay is a quantum event, yes. But the mechanism designed to kill the cat, the detector, the hammer, the vial of poison, that's a macroscopic classical system.
So the moment the decay occurs, it's an irreversible physical event that affects the mechanism.
And that mechanism, which includes the Geiger counter and the hammer, it registers the decay. That registration is an information exchange.
The decay event is instantly known by the mechanism itself. It has stored information about that event.
But we can go even further. Let's just assume the mechanism is instantaneous. The moment the poison is released, the cat interacts with that information. It registers the shock wave, the change in air pressure, the temperature change, the sudden smell of the poison. These are all physical constraints applied by the environment onto the cat.
And since the cat is this massive, complex, conscious observer operator, that information exchange immediately forces the collapse of its internal coherence field, its PI say.
If the poison is released, the cat's ITI spikes, and that forces an immediate, decisive, catastrophic state change to the dead state.
So the cat is a fully functional observer. It collapses its own local reality field immediately upon experiencing the outcome.
It determines its own reality state, whether it's alive or dead, long before the human observer on the outside even thinks about unlocking the door. The universe does not wait for us to decide the fate of the cat.
This analysis of the cat's agency is really compelling, but the classical defense of the paradox always relies on the idea of the perfectly isolated system.
Ah, yes.
They argue that the box walls perfectly shield the system from external observers, trapping the superposition inside.
And that defense only holds if you accept the classical definition of observer. The Marat framework dictates that everything that interacts and stores information resolves ambiguity. So we have to accept that everything is an observer, even the box walls are not passive.
How is a simple wooden or metal box an observer? This is a key point, I think, because it completely undermines the isolated system premise.
Well, remember our definition. Observation is active constraint application on phase space. Any interaction that limits potential outcomes is an observation.
So the box wall, the air molecules inside, the radiation detector.
They're all part of the Marat field. They're all physical structures that must conform to the coherence law, delta mathicolaris.
Okay, so let's imagine the two states. Cat alive versus cat dead.
If the cat is alive, the box interior contains very specific information about that state. There's metabolic heat production, there are breathing sounds, scent molecules associated with life, the air is slightly warmer, and the walls absorb that thermal signature.
Right. And if the cat is dead,
the air is cooling, the sound stops, and decomposition processes begin, which alters the local informational state.
that thermal data alone is a physical recording. The energy exchange, even the tiny difference in infrared radiation between a living body and a cooling corpse, means the superposition state is immediately decohered by the environment itself.
That's right. The matter of the box, just by interacting with the environment inside, acts as a distributed information storage system. It physically records the outcome.
And the superposition state, half warm, half cooling.
That is the state of highest energetic cost and highest structural dissonance. The system must collapse instantly to minimize the local mad action.
So the superposition collapses because it's energetically expensive, not because some magical consciousness decided it should.
Exactly. The box environment enforces coherence instantly, just as a matter of physics trying to maintain stability and efficiency.
The information exchange between the decay event and the detector, or the air, or the cat's body, is more than enough to stabilize one definitive reality state.
The universe updates its own coherence instantly, without waiting for the slow external human with their incomplete probability function.
So the moment we have multiple observers, the cat, the mechanism, the air, the box, we move into the realm of shared reality, which, in this framework, is a physical necessity.
Reality is co-created. Shared worlds emerge where individual renders harmonize. And this harmonization isn't arbitrary, it's driven by efficiency.
How so?
The source material notes that agreement or synchronization between observers has measurable energetic and informational signatures. Synchronization actually reduces the collective rendering cost.
So conflict, therefore, is literally physics. It increases entropy and informational fragmentation.
It does. So now consider the box system. We have a collective observer vector set. We have the cat's operator, the mechanism's operator, the box and air's operator.
A whole team of observers.
Right. And if multiple observers exist, the collapse occurs at the point of greatest information exchange, and it stabilizes a single coherent outcome that minimizes the mallet action for the entire local ensemble.
So the human outside the box, whose probability function still shows 50-50 superposition, they're just ignorant.
That's all it is. The physical reality of the box system has already stabilized. The human's lack of information does not translate to the reality inside the box being indeterminate.
The collapse is handled internally by the collective. They choose the most coherent, lowest tension path. The external human is an uninformed observer, not a determining one.
Absolutely.
This MAT framework also seems to necessitate a really radical shift in how we understand time itself. If everything is driven by meaning and coherence, is time still a fixed, independent dimension?
No. Time is redefined. It's not a fixed dimension, it's a rendering direction.
A rendering direction.
The arrow of time is proportional to the accumulation of integrated meaning. We move forward because meaning accumulates, complexity builds, and consciousness continuously updates its self-model and its environment into a more coherent state.
So if the collapse of reality is the selection of the most coherent path, then the flow of time is essentially the flow toward increasing coherence.
That's a great way to put it. Where consciousness defined as the function that seeks balance flows, the arrow of time points. The physical act of observation, which resolves ambiguity, is what gives time its direction.
What does this mean for the past, then? If we change our understanding of an event now, do we physically change the past?
According to this physics, the past is not a fixed history. It's a rendered archive. And it's continuously re-rendered based on new integration of meaning.
So when an observer has a massive new insight, or heals a trauma, or just integrates a huge piece of new information.
That awareness reorganizes memory into a more truthful, coherent narrative.
Wait, I have to challenge this here. Are you saying that if I remember something differently now, the past physically changes? That sounds dangerously close to, subjective revisionism.
It's physical revisionism, but it's driven by coherence, not just subjective belief. The past event, while it's archived, only exists in its rendered form. If your new integration significantly reduces the de-imbalance regarding that past event, let's say an act of forgiveness, you are physically minimizing that action in that domain.
And so,
The archived reality updates to reflect the new, lower tension state, which ensures structural consistency across your entire world line.
that's a powerful model for agency and healing. If meaning dictates reality, then conscious integration affects causality across time.
And this ties directly back to the cat. Reality branching, which we associate with quantum uncertainty, isn't arbitrary either. Choices are branch selections in the phase space.
And coherence determines which branch stabilizes.
Yes, branches closer to the center of the met field, the center of balance, are inherently more stable and integrable.
So the cat's fate is fixed instantly because its massive internal complexity instantly forces a choice based on maximizing coherence and minimizing its internal tension index.
It simply cannot afford the energetic cost of being on two branches at once.
A macroscopic system exists at such a massive scale of integrated information.
That its internal physics mandates an immediate, rapid resolution. The cat itself becomes the collapse mechanism, stabilizing its own state long before the external observer ever becomes relevant. The moment the decay occurs, the potential state is already forced onto a single, stable branch.
This entire deep dive just dismantles the cat paradox. It shifts it from a problem of quantum strangeness to a profound lesson in epistemology.
The study of knowledge itself.
Correct, and the limitations of being an external observer.
That's the core lesson we have to leave the listener with. The uncertainty was in the map, not the territory. I mean, we cannot stress this enough.
Right.
The entire absurd idea that the cat is both dead and alive is a result of treating the mathematical description of probability
Our lack of information.
as an existential statement about reality.
So when we, the external humans, run the probability equation, it tells us there's a 50% chance of one state and a 50% chance of the other. We look at that formula and we mistakenly project that ambiguity onto the physical system inside the box.
We make the fatal error of substitution. Unknown to me becomes indeterminate in reality.
But the universe has already registered the event.
The observer operator, deployed by the detector, the air, and most importantly, the cat itself, has already forced the wave function into a coherent single state to satisfy the physical law of coherence conservation.
So the cat paradox is really a mirror. It shows us the limitations of modeling reality from the outside, of insisting that consciousness is irrelevant. The moment we include the physical role of consciousness in information, the paradox it evaporates.
It reveals our intellectual arrogance, really. We assume that because we lack the data, the reality itself must be indeterminate. This physics corrects that assumption by establishing that the universe is a continuous, self-referencing coherence engine.
Let's connect this back to the most surprising component of the entire framework. The deep law of ma'at, or compassion. We defined it as a physical force. How does this link back to the cat and the concept of collapse.
Well, compassion is redefined here as energetic clarity. It's the ability of a system to minimize unnecessary tension and dissonance.
Okay.
The fundamental universal law states that all systems, from a particle to a planet, evolve toward reduced internal tension through empathic diffusion.
So the observer operator, which forces coherence, is operating by this exact principle. When the observer selects the state that minimizes mod action, delta math many, they are literally enacting this fundamental
A
physics.
system remaining in agonizing contradictory superposition, half alive, half dead, consuming energy just to maintain dissonance, is the definition of maximum tension and minimum coherence.
It's a physical impossibility.
It's a physical impossibility in a Modat-based
Yeah.
universe because the drive toward balance is built into the fabric of causality itself.
So if a conflict, a high-tension state arises, the universe, as a coherence engine, has to immediately resolve it to conserve energy and balance.
Which explains why the cat's fate collapses instantly. The system is designed for immediate resolution to prevent explosive tension buildup.
And the ultimate takeaway here provides peace, both to the cat and to our conceptual understanding of reality.
It does. The cat, whether alive or dead, achieves a coherent state where one daskel instantly. It is not suspended in agonizing paradox.
If the cat survives, it instantly returns to its stable oscillation, the Matt-Limit cycle. It continues its existence with sustained structure and compassion.
And if it dies, its energy and its pattern are transformed into a new, stable, coherent state. The system reaches closure. The collapse isn't a loss of information, but a transformation and a stabilization of energy.
The universal law holds true. The confusion lives in the gaps of our information, in our faulty map, not in the fabric of reality itself.
And consciousness, awareness, the drive for coherence, these are the functions that constantly work to close those gaps and resolve ambiguity.
The cat paradox serves as a profound teaching moment. The moment we incorporate meaning, agency, and physical information into our definition of reality, the fundamental contradictions of the quantum world just disappear.
We stop treating reality as this cold, deterministic, external mechanism, and we start seeing it as a dynamic, self-correcting, coherence-seeking process.
So we've unpacked Schrödinger's cat. We found that the paradox hinges entirely on an outdated assumption, the passive external observer. And when the physical act of knowing, of interacting, and of meaning is included through the observer operator and meaning-weighted rendering, the complex system stabilizes instantly.
The cat was never both things. That contradictory state was only ever held by us, the confused external observers, holding the contradiction in our incomplete model of the world.
While the cat, the mechanism, and the box had already agreed on the outcome. Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. If every act of observation physically collapses potential into the most meaningful, probable state for the observer, what does that imply about the collective rendering of our own world?
What happens when billions of minds, billions of observer operators align their intentions and their meanings, physically biasing the future toward a single, coherent outcome? The physics of the small, the quantum particle, and the physics of the very large, of collective society, are governed by the same rule. Coherence is conserved. If conflict increases entropy and consensus reduces rendering cost, then the alignment of meaning is not just an ethical imperative. It is the most powerful physical force available for shaping our future reality.